Hello, welcome to Nihonto no Beauty of Japanese Sword. My name is Hisashi Saito, owner of the Seiko-do in Ginza, Tokyo. In this third video, I will be speaking once again with Ueno-san to explore the 5 traditions of Japanese sword.
The Gokaden, or 5 traditions, gives us a great way of understanding the characteristics and the evolution of Japanese swords. And while this classification system was created after the fact, and while it may not take into account every school of swordsmith which span the country, it nonetheless gives us a great fundamental taxonomy for koto old swords that can really help our appreciation today. But rather than introducing the traditions one by one, we're going to connect them through a story. And that's the story of Masamune. Masamune was arguably the most celebrated swordsmith of all time, working from the late Kamakura period, and he epitomized the Soshu tradition. Here we have a striking Juyo token example by Masamune, which is owned by a private collector in Switzerland, and it well illustrates the technical prowess of Masamune. The jihada is a slightly pronounced itame and mokume pattern with beautiful chike, and the hamon, which is quiet at first glance, really shows the hallmark Soshu traits. Much activity, kintsugi, and of course shining nie, which the Soshu tradition is so well known for. This sword is accompanied by an origami from the Honnami family, which supports the attribution, and the appraisal underlines the fact that swords by the top Soshu smiths are really prized throughout history. Masamune's legacy will be carried on by Sadamune, who was his adopted son and himself a master of the Soshu tradition. This quiet and refined Juyo token example really reflects some of the hallmark Soshu traits which we just introduced. Again, that shining nie, and much activity in the hamon, including kintsugi and sumagashi. This Sadamune is accompanied by an origami and a sojo from the Honnami family, and that also boasts quite a remarkable pedigree with a Dennai provenance tied to the Yanagisawa family, and in particular to Lord Yanagisawa Mino no Kami, who was one of the highest officials under Tokugawa Tsunoyoshi in the Edo period.
The popularity of the Soshu tradition is interesting considering other traditions were established much earlier.
The Soshu tradition, so named for what was located in Sagami, or the seat of the Kamakura shogunate, was indeed born from a mix of other traditions. Specifically, 3 profoundly skilled swordsmiths were credited with moving to Sagami and establishing the basis of the Soshu tradition, and they were Awataguchi Kunitsuna from Yamashiro, and Saburo Kunimune and Ichimonji Sukezane from Bizen. It's said that Kunitsuna's son was Shintogo Kunimitsu, who was the teacher of Masamune. Shintogo Kunimitsu was one of the most famous makers of tanto with beautifully executed suguha hamon, and it's interesting to think about how this mix of styles evolved into the Soshu tradition.
The style of the Shintogo Kunimitsu seems very close to a Yamashiro tradition.
That's true, and this is probably a good chance to talk about the Yamashiro tradition. Kyoto was a center for some of the most refined sword workmanship in the late Heian period, and the Awataguchi school would carry on the style of Sanjo Munechika to establish the basis of the Yamashiro tradition in the early Kamakura period. Other major schools in Yamashiro included the Dai school and Ayano Koji. Kunitsuna was the youngest of 6 brothers in the Awataguchi school, all of whom were well renowned as being excellent swordsmiths. Here we have an exceptional Tokubetsu Juyo token masterpiece by Kunitsuna. We see a nice koshizori curvature which continues to the point, a mix of itame and mokume, a beautiful utsuri, and also a relatively wide hamon with absolutely brilliant amount of activity. It's worth noting that signed verifiable pieces by Awataguchi Kunitsuna like this are extremely scarce, and the small handful of extant examples will include Onimaru Kunitsuna, which is currently owned by the imperial family and is one of the Tenka Goken, or 5 invaluable swords as defined by the Ashikaga shogunate in the Muromachi period.
Sukezane and Kunimune were also among the most highly regarded smiths of their time.
Indeed, Sukezane was one of the most outstanding swordsmiths of the Fukuoka Ichimonji school and would go on to found the Kamakura Ichimonji school after moving to Sagami. And Kunimune left behind many masterpieces, which makes it easy to appreciate how he was a teacher of the great Shintogo Kunimitsu. And this is a good segue into the Bizen tradition. Bizen was a center for sword production since early times, and we see great examples of Kobizen work from the late Heian period. Among the many schools in Bizen, the Osafune school was the most prosperous. It was so named for its location, which was on the Yoshi River, and the school included many swordsmiths who are prized even by collectors today. Mitsutada, who founded the school in the mid-Kamakura period, and subsequent generations of masters, Nagamitsu, Kagemitsu, Kanemitsu. The Saburo Kunimune school was also located in Osafune, and here we have a remarkable Tokubetsu Juyo token example by the master. This piece shows similarities with Bizen contemporaries, including a relatively wide sugata, koshizori, a beautiful midare utsuri, and very interesting hamon showing hints of choji and much activity, ashi, yo, and of course Kunimune's signature hajimi.
After being established, the social tradition influenced many swordsmiths across the country.
And the 10 great students of Masamune are probably the most symbolic of that. The Jutetsu included some of the greatest smiths of the late Kamakura and the Nambokyo period. Osa, founder of the Samonji school in Kikuzen. Chogi, who exemplified the social-influenced Soden Bizen style. Hasebe Kunihige from Yamashiro province. And of course Norihige and Go Yoshihiro from Etchu province. We're quite fortunate today to be able to show a great Juyo token example attributed to Go Yoshihiro, also from a private collector in Switzerland. Go Yoshihiro was particularly well regarded among the Jutetsu for his mastery of Masamune's style. And while popular, extant examples are extremely rare, none will be signed. Particularly interesting in this sword is the hamon, which widens toward the point and is filled with much activity, kinsuji, tsunagashi, and shining nie. The boshi on the reverse is ichimai, so again we'll see strong social traits. But let's focus on one particular member of the Jutetsu who connected the remaining 2 traditions, and that was Kaniuji. Kaniuji was originally from the Yamato tradition. He studied under Masamune, then went on to found the Mino tradition, so we'll see an interesting evolution of styles. The original character in Kaniuji's name, which he later changed, was derived from his roots as a smith in the Tegai school of Yamato. Yamato was the oldest of the 5 traditions given its connections to the old capital of Nara, and many historians will point to Amakura and Amakuni as the earliest Japanese swordsmiths who are said to have lived in Yamato province in the 8th century. There are no extant examples today, but we know through excavations and through swords in the Shosui in Nara that swords in this period were straight shokuto. Straight swords evolved with a curvature in the early Heian period, and many scholars will point to the Kogara Sumaru, which was a legendary sword that was once owned by the Heikei clan, as an intermediate step toward the curved shinogi-tsukuri shape that we more commonly associate with Japanese swords today. Yamato swordsmiths were generally associated with temples, providing weapons for warrior monks, and it was through this network of temple affiliations that Yamato would exert influence over swordsmiths throughout the country.
Kaniuji world later have a very distinct style from the swordsmiths in the Yamato tradition.
Kaniuji and his subsequent Naoe Shizu school indeed showed strong social influence. Kaniuji would found the Mino tradition in what's current-day Gifu Prefecture, and despite being the newest of the traditions, Mino would exert significant influence on the subsequent development of Japanese swords. By the Muromachi period, Seki in Mino had become a center for sword production together with Osafune in Bizen. And by the time we get into the Momoyama and into the Edo period, many new schools of swordsmiths that emerged showed roots in the Mino tradition. So we've gone through much today in terms of sword evolution, but I hope that Masamune and the story of Soshu can spark some interest about the distinct yet interconnected 5 traditions.
Thank you for watching this third episode of Nihon Tonobi Beauty of Japanese Sword. I encourage everyone to explore the world of Nihonto along with the tradition and history that underlies the beauty.